Number 7. The 3,000-mile oil change. I have been fixing motorcycles for longer than most of you have been riding them, and nothing makes me want to retire faster than watching a guy drain perfectly clean synthetic oil out of a modern engine because Jiffy Lube got inside his head in 1983. You people are changing oil like it is still the era of flat tappet engines and petroleum-based slop that started breaking down by the time you hit the end of your driveway. You treat your maintenance schedule like a nervous tick. You cannot sleep if the odometer ticks past 3,000 miles without a drain pan under the bike. Some of you change it after every long trip, regardless of the mileage, because your buddy on the forum said he always does it and his engine has lasted forever. Your buddy is also throwing money away. He just does not know it yet. He has also convinced 3 other people on the same thread to do the same thing, so now there is a whole community of people committing coordinated, expensive, completely unnecessary oil changes and calling it diligence. Here is the mechanical reality. Modern full synthetic motorcycle oil is engineered with additive packages that include detergents, dispersants, antioxidants, and zinc-based anti-wear compounds. These formulations are designed to stay chemically stable and protective for 7,000 to 10,000 miles under normal riding conditions. At 3,000 miles, that oil has barely started working. The viscosity is holding, the additives are intact, and you are draining lubricant that still has several thousand miles of effective protection remaining. What actually degrades oil is heat cycling, combustion blow-by contaminating the crankcase, shear stress from sustained high RPM operation, and moisture accumulation from short cold weather rides that never fully warm the engine. None of those failure conditions are cured by panicking at 3,000 miles. Open your owner's manual, find the manufacturer's stated interval, use a quality JASOMA, rated synthetic that is compatible with your wet clutch, and stop performing anxiety-based maintenance on an engine that is fine. Number 6. Warming up the bike for 10 minutes. You know exactly who you are. You walk out to the garage, thumb the starter, and then go back inside to put on your second boot, find your gloves, check your phone, drink the rest of your coffee, and have an argument with your wife about something entirely unrelated to motorcycles. Meanwhile, your fuel-injected bike is sitting in the driveway at idle, baking its exhaust headers to a color you would describe as amber at best and approaching cherry red at worst, consuming fuel and accomplishing exactly nothing useful for the mechanical condition of that motorcycle. You finally come back out, look at the bike with pride, and say you like to let her warm up properly. You did not warm up the bike properly. You thermally stressed the exhaust system, ran the engine lean through the catalytic converter, and wasted enough gas to get you a quarter mile down the road. This habit is a carburetor hangover that needs to be put down permanently. Carbureted engines genuinely needed enrichment circuits and idle time because their fuel metering was entirely mechanical. The mixture ran rich from a choke jet until coolant temperature brought the intake manifold up to temperature, and the fuel began atomizing correctly. Modern fuel injection operates on a completely different principle. The ECU reads coolant temperature, intake air temperature, throttle position, and engine speed continuously, adjusting fuel delivery in milliseconds to maintain the correct stoichiometric ratio from the very first firing event. The engine is compensating for cold conditions before the combustion cycle is half a second old. What your motorcycle actually requires after a cold start is roughly 20 to 30 seconds of idle for oil pressure to build and reach the top end, and then gentle low RPM riding, while coolant reaches full operating temperature. Extended idling accomplishes nothing for your tires, your transmission oil, or your fork fluid. Start the bike, count to 30, and ride gently. That is what the engineers designed it to do. You have made it this far, which means you are either furious or you already knew all of this and feel personally vindicated. Either way, subscribe to the channel before you forget. Drop a comment below and tell me which one of these myths you have been defending on a forum this year. Be honest, I already know. Number 5. Premium gas makes more power. There is a guy at every gas station standing next to a bone stock metric cruiser with a low compression ratio, carefully selecting 93 octane like he is choosing a Scotch whiskey. He feels like he is giving the bike a gift. He will mention it at the next group ride because it signals he takes his machine seriously. He has also done this for 3 years and noticed zero difference in performance or fuel economy, which is the most honest review of the practice you will ever hear. What he actually did was spend more money per fill for a measurable gain of zero. And if his motorcycle was calibrated from the factory for 87 octane regular fuel, he may have marginally reduced combustion efficiency because the higher octane fuel resists ignition more than his engine's compression ratio actually requires. Octane is not a power rating. Octane is a measurement of a fuel's resistance to auto-ignition, which engineers call detonation or knock. When a high compression engine squeezes the air and fuel mixture, cylinder pressure and temperature rise dramatically. In a low-octane fuel, that mixture can ignite spontaneously before the spark plug fires, creating destructive, uncontrolled combustion that can damage pistons and bearing surfaces. High-octane fuel resists that premature self-ignition, which is critical in a high-compression or turbocharged engine running aggressive ignition timing. But if your engine was engineered to run at 9.5 to 1 compression on 87 octane fuel, there is no detonation event occurring in the first place. The premium fuel has nothing to prevent. Your ECU does not detect the higher octane rating and advanced timing to extract additional power, because modern ECUs do not have octane sensing capability unless your bike has a knock sensor integrated into the calibration. Check your compression ratio in your service manual. Match the octane rating to what the manufacturer specifies. Stop spending extra money on a placebo. The money saved goes toward actual maintenance that makes a measurable difference, like fresh brake fluid and a new air filter for an engine that has no use for premium octane. D40 where is chain lube. This argument has been rotting in forum threads since the internet existed, and I am ending it right now with mechanical facts rather than opinions. Every season, some writer discovers that WD-40 makes a dirty chain look clean and shiny, concludes he has found the ultimate bargain maintenance solution, posts it proudly, and ignites a 47-page argument where nobody changes their mind and 2 people quietly destroy their chains. The guy defending it always says the same thing. He has used it for years and his chain is fine. His chain is also not going to last as long as it should, and he does not have a baseline to compare against because he has never maintained a chain correctly. WD-40 stands for Water Displacement Formula 40. It is a light penetrating oil and solvent compound, and it is an outstanding product for what it was actually designed to accomplish, including displacing moisture from electrical contacts, freeing seized fasteners, and cutting through surface oxidation. It is not a heavy-duty lubricant, and applying it to a modern sealed chain creates a specific and predictable sequence of mechanical problems. It dissolves existing lubricant from the chain's external surfaces, leaving the rollers and plates momentarily bare. Because it has very low viscosity, it evacuates from the chain almost immediately under centrifugal force at riding speed. Most critically, WD-40 acts as a solvent on the nitrile rubber, O rings and X rings that seal factory grease inside each chain link at the pin and bushing interface. Those seals exist for one purpose: to retain the internal lubrication where actual metal wear occurs. Compromise those seals and the chain degrades from the inside while looking perfectly acceptable from the outside right up until it stretches prematurely, skips under load, or snaps at the worst possible moment. Use purpose-made O-ring safe chain lubricant. Apply it to a warm chain, wipe the excess, and repeat every 500 miles or after riding in rain. That is the complete procedure, and it costs about $4 more than the WD-40 you were reaching for. Number 3. Car tires on motorcycles. Let me describe the Darksider for you. He is a large platform touring rider who has calculated that mounting an automotive tire on his rear wheel saves him a meaningful amount of money versus dedicated motorcycle rubber over the course of a riding season. He will defend this on forums with the single-minded intensity of someone whose identity depends on the outcome. He has the mileage numbers, he has the testimonials, he will tell you his handling feels completely normal. He is not lying to you. He has also ridden on compromised geometry for long enough that he has lost the reference point for what correct handling feels like. And he is applying the savings logic of a sensible consumer to a problem that requires the engineering logic of a chassis designer. Here is the physics that matters. A motorcycle tire has a rounded cross-section profile. When you lean and load the contact patch progressively through a corner, That curved profile transitions smoothly from the center tread to the shoulder rubber as lean angle increases. The sidewall of a motorcycle tire is engineered to flex in a controlled progressive manner under lean load, functioning as a secondary suspension element and transmitting continuous feedback through the frame and bars. A car tire has a flat, squared-off tread profile and a dramatically stiffer sidewall that was optimized for vertical cornering loads on four wheels. When you lean a motorcycle on a car tire, you transition abruptly from the flat center section to a stiff sidewall that was never designed for lean angle loading. The steering geometry that your manufacturer engineered becomes distorted. Turn-in is heavier. Transitions feel more abrupt and less predictable in changing radius corners. And if that car tire suffers a sudden air loss, the sidewall collapses instantly with no warning. A motorcycle tire with a slow puncture still holds some shape long enough to feel abnormal and respond. A flat car tire on a motorcycle is a crash event, not an inconvenience. Number 2. Battery tenders. Fix dead batteries. Every spring, it is the same scene. The rider walks into the garage, finds the battery that has been sitting completely discharged since October, hooks it to a quality tender for 3 or 4 days, sees 12.6 volts on the display, puts the battery in the bike, and rides confidently to the gas station 7 miles away where the engine will not restart. He followed the process, he used the right equipment, he still bought a paperweight. What he did not understand is that the battery was already permanently damaged 4 months before he connected the tender, on the day he parked the bike for winter without charging it first and left it to sit discharged in an unheated environment until spring. The mechanism of failure is sulfation. When a lead-acid battery discharges, lead sulfate forms on the battery plates as a normal byproduct of the chemical reaction. In a healthy battery that is recharged promptly, that sulfate redissolves back into the electrolyte. When a discharged battery sits without recharging, the lead sulfate begins crystallizing on the plate surfaces. Soft sulfation from short-term neglect can sometimes be partially addressed by smart chargers using low-voltage pulse conditioning. Hard sulfation from months of neglect produces dense, non-conductive lead sulfate crystals that cannot be reversed by any consumer charging device. Those crystals permanently reduce the active plate surface area, which means the battery cannot store or deliver its rated capacity. The tender brings voltage up to 12.6 volts. The battery passes a basic test, but under the real load of a starter motor demanding over 100 cold cranking amps, it collapses. A battery tender is a maintenance and preservation tool, not a restoration device. Connect it before winter to a healthy battery, keep it connected through cold months, and the battery will be reliable in spring. Ignore it from October through April, and no charger reverses months of crystalline plate damage. Buy the tender in the fall. Use it from day 1 of storage. That is the only version of this story that ends well. 1. Loud pipes save lives. Here we are at the finish line. The oldest, loudest, most exhaustively defended myth in motorcycling, and the one that generates more angry messages to this channel than everything else combined. The rider who rips the baffles out of his cruiser, wakes up an entire neighborhood at 6 in the morning, and genuinely believes he has engineered himself a safety feature. He has a righteous explanation ready at all times. He brings it up before anyone asks. He repeats it louder, appropriately, if challenged. He has also apparently never applied basic acoustic physics to his own exhaust system, because if he had, the entire argument falls apart in about 15 seconds. Your exhaust pipe faces rearward. The acoustic energy exits behind the motorcycle. Because you are traveling forward, you are continuously moving away from the primary direction of sound propagation. The driver in the modern SUV directly in front of you, sealed inside a vehicle with sound insulation, climate control running, and music or phone audio active, does not hear your exhaust until you are already alongside or past his door pillar. This is identical to the reason emergency vehicles mount sirens at the front of the apparatus, facing the direction of travel, so the warning precedes the hazard. Your pipes face the opposite direction from every threat you are concerned about. A Romanian acoustic study found that alerting a driver inside a modern vehicle at intersection distances would require exhaust noise exceeding 135 decibels, louder than a jet at takeoff, causing permanent hearing damage after 15 minutes of exposure. Additionally, Removing baffles without an ECU recalibration to restore back pressure, tuning disrupts the exhaust scavenging the engine was mapped for, reducing low-end torque. You made the bike louder, slower, and more likely to earn a noise citation. Wear high visibility gear, practice threshold braking until it is muscle memory. Take an advanced riding course and apply what they teach. Those interventions have documented effects on crash outcomes. Your straight pipes wake up the neighborhood and do nothing for the driver not looking at you. That is the complete truth.